Mr. Chair, I think we've got just a bare quorum. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually, more than a bare quorum. So 11 of our 15 members are present.
Looks like it. Let me turn off my background. Here we go. Okay. So I got Eric, do you have a flag or do you want to use this one?
If you could hold up yours, I am so sorry. That's the one thing I did not get pulled up on the screen.
I think. There we go. All right. I'm going to ask Stacey, you're our newest member. Can you hear me okay? Can you lead us in the pledge? Let me know if you can.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Stacey.
You're welcome.
All right. Let me put my beautiful Delta virtual stand to look at my office. Not that it's bad to look at. Where are we? Where are we? There we are. Out my front door. There we go. Thank you, Eric. Welcome. I think this is going to be a short meeting, but you never know. Does everybody have the agenda? Hopefully, if you didn't, let us know, and Eric or somebody can send that around to you. I want to start off by welcoming Stacey. Stacey, could you just kind of tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do over there at the department?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. So my name's Stacey Sherman. I'm an environmental program manager at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Bay Delta region. So I run the program that monitors the effectiveness of wetland restoration in the Delta and Sassoon Marsh. So some of you may know that Greg Erickson was our Bay Delta regional manager. He retired very recently. I spent the past 2 months as acting regional manager and taking this on until we have a permanent regional manager, and then we can go from there. So I live in Stockton. I love the Delta. Happy to be with you.
Great, thank you. And we really appreciated the input that we had from the department over the past. And so we look forward to anything you have to share. Just please just jump right in and let us know what you think.
Mr. Chair, would you like to kind of run through real quick who we have from the committee on the meeting right now? Just to be efficient.
I'm gonna thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, we should do it. So we have Russ Ryan. Russ, raise your hand there. Russ has that beautiful background. Russ is with the water contractors. Yes, he's excited about that. We got Douglas. Douglas is gives us great input. He's from Grand Island and represents. I'm going to get this wrong, Douglas. The like a cultural.
The cultural preservation.
Thank you very much, Eric. And we've got Eddie with that water behind him, DWR. Eric's in charge. I'm sorry, Eddie's our guy that is in invasive weeds, and he is one of the most knowledgeable, up-to-date people that we're going to have around. He's a great guy. Then we got Mario. Mario's with Reclamation, federal government. And really glad to have Mario here. He's giving us really good input. And we got Dan Wells. Dan's from the service, Fish and Wildlife Service. He's with Interior also. And although we haven't seen any disagreements between the service and reclamation, we know that happens sometimes. So, but they're working as a team, which is great. Morris, I'm blanking out Morris on
Delta Recreation.
Delta Recreation. Thank you. Todd, it doesn't have a video on. Todd, Eric, you know what? I don't have the list in front of me.
Yeah, Todd is also Delta Recreation.
Delta Recreation. And Eric, Mary is next. What does she represent?
Mary Pash and Jamil Ibrahim are with Stantec. They're talking to the item later on the agenda regarding the Delta
Okay.
Cross Channel, as is Colin Maloney, although Colin's with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay, USBR. And then DeWitt is next. DeWitt is with us from what does DeWitt represent? DeWitt, what do you represent us for?
This is DeWitt's first meeting. He was appointed to the advisory committee in May. We welcome him. He's with Staten Island, works for Conservation Farms and Ranches. And DeWitt is one of our Delta Habitat and Conservation non-governmental entity representatives, along with Jim Cox.
Good. Hey, DeWitt, so we're going to come back to you in a second. Just as we had Stacey introduce herself, we want to come back and let you say in a minute a few words about what you do.
Okay.
Then we had Jim Cox. Jim is fisherman, right? Jim is with fishermen. We hear Jim is also on the stakeholder engagement committee with the water contractors proposed project. And we got Sam Garcia. Sam is an environmental gentleman with PG&E, represents utilities. We talked about Colin, and I'm not doing Greg without the names, the faces.
Yeah, the only one you're missing Lindsay Liebig and Craig Watanabe, both representing Delta Agriculture.
That's right. And Craig is a manager of one of the islands down. I think Craig, right in the Central Delta or South Delta. I forget which of those two.
Central Delta, Mandeville Island.
Mandeville Island, Central Delta.
Central Delta. And then Lindsay's with Restore the Delta. And let me know, I don't think I missed anybody that's on the committee.
Lindsay's with Sacramento County Farm Bureau. You should just
Sacramento County Farm Bureau
next time. So
sorry, Lindsay.
And I think Barbara Daly just joined us. If it's identified as George and Barbara, is that you, Barbara Daly?
Yes, hello.
Hi there, welcome.
Thank you. I'm having trouble with my video, so
no problem.
try to get it to work here.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Barbara.
Okay, great, you're welcome.
And then, Mr.
So,
Chair,
Stacey,
we also have some ex officio members, Jeff Henderson with the Delta Stewardship Council. Of course, Ryan Stanbrough is going to be briefing us on the Stewardship Council activities in just a moment. Really great to have Chris Chernell join us with the Department of Water Resources. And you mentioned Mario and Dan. They both are ex officio representing federal agencies. And I think that's it. Oh, another member is Robin Brown representing Delta Business. Both Barbara Daly and Robin Brown are our advisory committee members representing Delta Business. And then to round it out, myself and Virginia Gardner from the commission staff. And then Carolyn Bragg, I think, is a member of the public who has joined us, but we welcome her.
Good. Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, DeWitt, back to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the committee.
Okay, my name is Dawid Zalaka, and I work for the Nature Conservancy, but I'm president of Conservation Farms and Ranches, a related entity that manages the wildlife-friendly agricultural operation on Staten Island. And Eric asked me to join this group. We're doing basically a lot of grain crops. We've been predominantly a corn farm, and we're switching over to rice. We are about to harvest 1,000 acres of rice, and our goal is to convert most of our corn production to rice. And then we're also working on a 1,000-acre semi-permanent seasonal wetland project. And I'm president of Reclamation 38, and also president of Reclamation 2110, McCormick Williamson. And that's it. And thank you for having me. And Eric, thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad you're a part, DeWitt. Thanks.
Great, thank you for joining us. I'm familiar with your predecessors, all great people. Let's go down the agenda. Carolyn, you might be the only person here from the public, but I need to ask, are there any comments from the public? This is the opportunity to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Nobody's raising their hand. Douglas, you raising your hand?
Yeah. Oh, I just have a question to Dawid. Well, I mean, isn't it growing rice requires more water than corn? So is this a good time to make this conversion?
Do you have a really short answer to that?
Maybe, but also
right.
if you don't want the rice helps you reduce or stop your subsidence on the peat soils in the delta. And so growing corn, you're losing a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of soil a year in the heavy peat soils. That's what we were losing. So that helps us save our peat soils and maintain our island. And it's economically more viable than corn.
And it also keeps weeds down too.
And it's good for the birds. So there you go.
All right, good.
All right, thank you.
Great answer. We'll take that as our public comment. Seeing none, item 3. Ryan.
Russell Ryan?
There you are. Hey, Ryan. Thank you for
Good.
joining us.
Thank you. No,
And thanks for, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Proceed.
Go ahead. I appreciate the opportunity. This is probably the first time I've been before the DPAC in quite some time. So good evening to the committee members. As mentioned, I am Ryan Stanton, I'm the council's chief deputy. Here to give what I think is going to be a semi-brief update on current council activities, but feel free to ask questions along the way, or we can take them at the end. I'm easy either way. So the council held its August meeting about 2 weeks ago with a relatively full agenda. A list of actions taken included staff providing an update on the implementation of the council's public participation plan, which is now been in place for, I think, a little over a year. And if I recall, this committee did have at least an interest in the development, and I believe provided input on that initiative. So yeah, I think that's something that the council will continue to track over time, obviously with the kind of the unique setting that we find ourselves in now, 18 plus months out. Participation in terms of kind of public engagement is vastly different. And I think at the council, we found ways in which we can make that work, but we'll continue to seek input from members of the public as well as other interested parties. The council also approved the submittal of a comment letter containing findings on the consistency of the Delta Protection Commission's update to its economic sustainability plan, that consistency with the Delta plan. And then finally, on the Delta levees investment strategy front, the council directed staff to initiate rulemaking to amend Chapter 7 of the Delta plan, and more specifically, Delta Plan Policy RRP1, or Risk Reduction Policy 1. This is a process that we anticipate will occur over the course of the next probably 6 to 9 months or thereabouts. The staff report, the proposed regulation, and other related materials are all located on the website for the public to view at https://deltacouncil.ca.gov/public-participation. And please feel free to direct any comments or questions to the council at the following address, which is amend.rrp1@deltacouncil.ca.gov. And the reason I am giving both of those, in particular that last email, is that on the advice of our legal counsel, we are, as staff, are going to be somewhat limited in our ability to have public engagement on discussion of the levees investment strategy now that we have been directed to move into rulemaking. So I'm guessing there are going to be some questions on that. I will do the best I can but just want to note that up front that we are somewhat limited once again on the advice of our legal counsel. A few other items I want to kind of highlight for the committee this evening. On the science front, the science program is currently preparing for a salinity management workshop in early 2022. And this will, the overarching goal of the workshop is to begin development of a framework for evaluating alternative management scenarios under sustained drought conditions. Additional goals include identifying socioeconomic and other knowledge gaps regarding salinity management, as well as fostering collaborative dialogue. The Delta Protection Commission, as I understand it, Eric, as well as Natasha, are participating on the workshop planning committee, which I know myself and others greatly and sincerely appreciate their participation and collaboration. Also, I understand that Michelle Leidenfelder Miles will be participating in the workshop planning. She is an agronomist and the Delta crop advisor working out of the UC Agriculture and Natural Resources. The second item on science is the Science Action Agenda. This is the collaboratively produced document that identifies science priorities to guide science investment and coordination for the Delta. The development of the 2022 to 2026, so it's a every 5-year kind of effort, is nearing its completion after 18 months of stakeholder surveys, public workshops, and work by the Delta Science Program to publish the top 65 management questions of the Delta, as well as the management needs for the next 5 years. A public survey to solicit feedback on the draft science actions will be distributed in the second half of this month, and a full draft of the upcoming science action agenda will be available for public comment in November. On the planning front, Delta Adapts. This is the council's initiative to better understand the regional vulnerabilities associated with climate change, as well as offering strategies and tools to assist local and state entities with adaptation planning. As you'll recall, the council released its final vulnerability assessment in response to public comment earlier this spring. Staff are currently in the process of finalizing the scope and approach for the adaptation strategy. The strategy will be based on evaluation of multiple scenarios with different combinations of agriculture, ecosystem, flood management, and water supply adaptations all being considered. Focus groups of local experts will consider and propose adaptations for each of these topics for 4 sub areas of the Delta and Sassoon March. And I believe each focus group will include members of the DPC and or the DPAC. Let's see, and then finally turning to the council's ecosystem amendment work and update to chapter 4 of the Delta plan, where staff has been working on the draft program EIR with an anticipated release of September the 27th, which will kick off a 64-day public comment period ending November 30th. I believe the extra 4 days in there are given the Thanksgiving holiday. The council meeting item for the ecosystem amendment is currently scheduled for November 18th. This is where the council will review amendment content as well as hear public comments on the draft EIR. And just a note there, no significant changes have been proposed to the May 2020 draft. However, the ecosystem amendment will now incorporate a revised version of the Good Neighbor Checklist, which was developed in concert or by stakeholders with input from agencies. This will be, the checklist will be included as an appendix. And Mark, I will stop right there and happy to answer any questions.
Ryan, let me just start off by asking, looking back to topic number 1, you mentioned RRP1 in connection with the proposed amendments to the rules regarding levies. Just for the sake of everybody, could you explain what those letters and that number means, and just summarize that rule so we have context?
Yeah, certainly. So RRP1, this is Risk Reduction Policy 1 of the Delta Plan. And currently the policy for RRP1, that policy in the Delta Plan is an interim policy intended to guide how state discretionary investments in Delta levies are made. And currently it's a relatively high level policy that really is kind of a 3x3 matrix that looks to prioritize things such as protecting lives, protecting property, protecting ecosystem investments, protecting other aspects in terms of infrastructure and the like. So it's an interim policy. It was when the Delta Plan was adopted in 2013, the council at the time anticipated in response to Water Code 85306, revisiting the policy to adopt a more permanent risk reduction policy. And the council is currently 7 years into that process. So that's where currently things stand.
So without getting down into the weeds, what is staff's concept of harmonizing the risk reduction strategies with other state programs such as subventions or special projects, or even the Corps' decisions on where and when to repair levees?
Well, I think the direction that the council received from the legislature and the Reform Act is we believe at the council pretty clear. The notion that and that direction was for the council in concert with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and DWR has been included in this discussion and development as well, was to develop priorities, recognizing the fact that there's limited funds and funds continuing to kind of wax and wane over time. There's limited funds and we can't, or the state and local reclamation districts are unable to spend all put resources in all the islands that need it at any one time. So really it was focused on a risk reduction based approach that said, really, not only what was the current flood risk of a particular island, but also what were the consequences of an island flooding in terms of risk to life, risk to property, the importance of water conveyance in the corridor, ecosystem potential, as well as legacy communities, state highways, and impacts on prime agricultural land. So this is not intended to be necessarily an all-encompassing Delta levies policy. I think what we are striving for at the council is to really, ultimately the upshot of the prioritization is a report by the Department of Water Resources to the council that will be able to be viewed by the public, that ultimately details how the department is making its expenditures in the Delta. And so it's a little bit of a unique aspect in terms of a regulation, but it's not really the mandate portion of this regulation would truly be a report rather than a direct impact on a behavioral change.
Thank you, Ryan. Eddie, and then Ryan. Eddie?
Thank you, Mark.
There you are. Okay.
I'll lower my hand here. I just had a quick question, Ryan, specifically on the science action agenda and whether or not the council has considered enhanced restoration coordination in that agenda. And specifically what I'm getting at here is State Parks collaboratively is working with the Department of Water Resources and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to do aquatic vegetation management in the name of ecosystem restoration. And it appears that we might need more enhanced coordination in terms of how we look in the long term, in terms of specifically of early detection and rapid response. So if we go in and try to control an area and then try to sustain that restoration, how does that work? Has that been considered at all in the science action agenda?
Yeah, the short answer I have to say, Eddie, is I'm not certain to what extent. I mean, obviously, collaboration and this level of coordination, I think the science program recognizes, even the development of something like a science action agenda, the value of that process and ultimately that document is only able to be realized with the level of coordination across multiple entities. So, I would assume there is some level of coordination that's been considered. I also know that the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee, and with Amanda Bull leading that up on our side, has looked at kind of an ecosystem restoration subgroup as in an effort to really increase kind of restoration coordination across the entities. So happy to follow up if there's something more specific. But that's kind of what I can give you off the top of my head.
Sure, very good. I'll follow up with you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Eddie. Ryan, Russ, sorry.
Yeah, I answered it both. Coming from a military family, you can answer. You're allowed to answer by both.
Thank you.
Ryan, my question revolves around what I've been hearing with regards to the N-Delta folks is they don't feel like they're being listened to. And certainly I understand the response of there's legal things you can do and legal things you can't do. But that actually just puts it into an adversarial mood. And I notice that there's a rulemaking that I think it's a year long. My question is, how long is rulemaking? At what point does AOL weigh in? And obviously there'll be a number of opportunities for public participation, whether it's verbal or in writing, like you have said. Is there any other outreach to the N-Delta folks?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Russ. So maybe to your first question, in terms of timeline, I think I gave in my brief presentation a 6 to 9 months. It certainly could go longer than that, just depending on if, for instance, if the council gives staff additional direction to make changes to the proposed regulatory language, depending on the substance of those changes, that would require the council or staff to go back out for an additional public comment period, which could be as little as 15 days or as much as 45 days, depending on the substance of those changes. At this point, at the August council meeting, the council did not provide staff with any direction to make additional changes at this point. That's not to say they can't, but that's the current direction that staff is heading in. To your point with regards to placing this kind of in an adversarial position, on the staff side, I think we have up until really this point, we have done, we have certainly made the efforts to engage as many folks as we can. I recognize that we may have missed some folks, and I recognize that as well, we didn't always come to terms in terms of what an actual agreement would look like. I know for myself, certainly enhanced my understanding, but at the same time, staff, obviously, I think as you are aware, is required to take its direction from the council. And so really, my hope personally is to continue to the extent we can under the confines of the rulemaking process to engage where possible.
One last question with regards to risk reduction. As you look at the risk reduction, are you looking at all the risks? Because there's obviously, you got sea level rise, which will occur over a much broader time. And quite honestly, in dealing with some of the levee standards, I'm pretty well versed on those standards. And moving forward into the future, we have ideas on how to incorporate that sea level rise into those standards. But with that saying, there's also this, in my mind, there's also the seismic risk, which a lot of work has been done on analysis over the last 5 to 10 years. In other words, what I look for is slumping is not as great as what was originally thought of through the DREAM study that DBR did. My question is, are you going to consider all the stressors? Because especially seismic, you don't know when it's going to hit. There's a high probability, in the more recent future that could occur. But obviously, if that does hit and things do kind of shake out, I was standing on Bolden Island when the 6.0 earthquake, recent one, occurred. I saw that, and I was probably in the worst part of Bolden's levee system, the weakest part. I literally saw that levee move right to left, half a foot to a foot. Shaking occurred about 20 seconds, and then it moved back. And that was a real kind of eye opener for me of, wow, this is pretty intense. So that's kind of why I'm asking and focusing in on seismic as an example.
Yeah. I think the best way to probably answer that question, Russ, is at the council, we recognize that the investment strategy and really the levees in the Delta, and the Delta as a general system is very dynamic. And so the investment strategy, our approach with it has really been one in which we have tried to take as much of a global consideration in terms of seismic, in terms of climate change and sea level rise scenarios to the extent we can, but we fully intend to revisit the investment strategy on an ongoing basis, probably somewhere along the line similar to what is required of the council to review the Delta plan at least every 5 years. I noticed Jeff's on the line as well, and we talk often about the investment strategy, and particularly is going to be one of those unique initiatives in which it is going to be kind of proverbial and ongoing in terms of what we're doing in our efforts there. And so really the value of DLIS and the decision support tool that supports it is only going to be as useful as the data that supports it. And so it really speaks to, and if that data and we as council staff and our engagement of folks like yourself and others in kind of the community, if we're not engaging you all in getting that most up-to-date information as well as incorporating the best science, then the investment strategies become stale and really lacking in terms of impact. So I think we recognize that it's an ongoing process and surely realize that we will continue to have our work cut out for us.
One last thing I think you'll like to hear is, I'll leave you with this. Over on Bolden Island, from Metropolitan Water District's standpoint, since we own it, we've been testing real-time technologies to look below the surface of the levees and coming up with some pretty interesting results and how we can monitor and use real-time monitoring tools with drones flying resistivity type magnometers that look below the surface for voids as well as ferrous metal. And we're finding a lot of different things, positive stuff that could inform better data for wiser investments. Is kind of, I'll leave that with you and stay tuned because we're about 6 months away from completing a report, which we will distribute and also, implore your engineers as well as DWR's engineers to take a look at. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised to see how we can do things easier, cheaper, and spread the money more broadly.
Thanks for that. I look forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Ryan. Just checking. Any other hands? Any other questions? Ryan, thank you for giving us a report, and we look forward to having more of these in the future. I think it's just helpful the more agencies talk to each other and communicate other than in the formal setting of a meeting. So thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Agreed. No, thank you for having it. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to future decisions.
Great, thank you. And you're welcome to stick on the rest of the meeting. And all right, next, cross-channel improvement. Colin, Dan, Mario, do you want to introduce Colin?
Yes, I'll do a little introductions here.
Hey, Mario, real quickly before you start, I just want to recognize that Chris Elias joined us right toward the start of Ryan Stanbrough's presentation, and welcome him.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. I apologize for joining a bit late. Just want to jump in from one Zoom meeting to another. So you know how it goes. So thanks again.
Go ahead, Mario.
All right.
Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, so and Carolyn Bragg is with Reclamation. She's in our office. She does the NEPA for the Delta Cross Channel. So yeah, appreciate the third opportunity to come talk about this project that we've been working on. I think Colin and Mary and Jamil can give an update on what's new since we last talked way back in March. Feels a lot longer with COVID of how far March is, but that was the last time we talked about it. So they'll go over what the updates are. The questions that I like you guys to be thinking about in your head as they're going through their updates, in addition to any comments that you may have on the alternatives, is what voting options should we be considering in these alternatives? And Mary reminded me of my boss's notation that, and when we talk about recreational benefits or betterments that are beyond just reasonable voter safety, that's something Reclamation has addressed, but recreational betterments, that's where we need your help and knowledge on potential funding partners to do that. It's a long way of saying if we're thinking about boat locks, that's something that Reclamation would definitely need some funding partners on, and your guys' help on identifying who those may be. So the first question is, what voting options should we be considering for these alternatives? And the second one is, who or what group should we also reach out to get that input beyond contacting California Division of Voting and Waterways? So with that, I'll turn it over to Colin and company.
Thanks, guys. As Mario mentioned, I'm Colin William, project manager for Reclamation on this project, but we have had some stellar work in the last few months since March, and I'm going to hand off to Jamil Abraham from Stantec to fill us in on where we are and start trying to pick your brains for some potential boat questions we could use help answering, some thoughts we could use your input on.
Thanks, Colin. And Eric and Mark, if you don't mind allowing me the ability to share screens, I have some slides I'd like to actually put up for the team.
We're good with that. Eric, sound, Eric, Mike.
Sorry about that. That would be me. Let's see, do you have to initiate the screen share or do I?
I think I do, but the message that I receive on my end is host disabled participant screen sharing, Eric.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was one thing that. Okay, try it now, Jamil. I'm
Right,
sorry
I think
about
I have
that.
it. That worked.
Wonderful.
All right, Eric, if you don't mind, just give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Great. All right. So thank you, Colin. Thank you, Mario. And thank you, Eric and Mark, for having us today. As we pointed out, so last time we actually got together here was back in March of 2021 to actually provide you all with an update. And most of our update at that time was related to an evaluation of the existing gate structure. We have some information to share today just regarding that evaluation, as well as the next steps regarding our analysis of different options that are being considered for that project. What I'm sharing on the screen right now is a project objective that we've developed for this project, the Delta Cross Channel Gate Upgrades Project. I'm going to read it off for you, even though it's on your screen. It's improved flexibility, reliability, and safety of operations of the Delta Cross Channel gates, consistent with Reclamation's proposed action described in the biological assessment of the reinitiation of consultation for the coordinated operations of the CVP and SWP. So for all those that are aware, Reclamation and DWR operate under a coordinated agreement for the CVP and SWP. The Delta Cross Channel Gate Upgrades Project was called out as a potential modification or improvement under that biological assessment. So what we're looking at for this project are opportunities to actually upgrade or modify the existing facility to accommodate flexible, reliable, and safe operations of the gate structure. And the reason I'm specifying and taking a few minutes to actually just talk about this objective is because there's often some confusion about what this project is and whether we'll be looking at any changes in operations of this facility under this project. And we're here to actually suggest, no, we're not doing that right now. What we're looking at is modifications to the existing structure that would be able to accommodate more frequent and potentially remote operations of that facility. So just wanted to provide that clarification. This is an overview of our study process. Of course, stakeholder involvement, which you see across the top, is taking place throughout the entire process. When we met with you back in March, we had just concluded with what we consider the evaluation of the existing structure. So we had been out there to the site, performed a number of non-destructive tests on the facility to evaluate the condition of the existing structure that was built back in the early 1950s to determine if and how that structure could be modified to accommodate more frequent operations. So we completed that evaluation, and over the past few months, we've been working on what we're referring to here as initial options. What could we do to modify this existing facility to accommodate more frequent operations? Next steps after we complete our initial options is to evaluate those options against some established evaluation criteria. And I'll get into that here a little bit later. Over the past several months, we've been performing some biological species surveys on the site, doing some habitat evaluations, determining whether or not there are any endangered species present in and around the facility. And we're planning some engineering investigations early next year as well too. After we've completed our alternatives development and alternatives analysis, we'll be going into an analysis of feasibility level alternatives that are evaluated for the project. And I'll get into that here shortly. And then concurrent with that, we'll be initiating what we'll refer to as NEPA compliance, or National Environmental Policy Act compliance, and then later getting into permitting and permitting support for implementation of a project if one is implemented. So I mentioned a lot of our time over the past few months has really been actually focusing on options development. And when we're talking about options development, we're really focusing primarily on modifications to the existing structure. So the photo that you see in front of you is that Delta Cross Channel gate structure looking downstream from River Road, just south of Locke, north of Walnut Grove. So we're looking at modifications to this existing structure, how you can modify this existing facility to accommodate more frequent operations and potentially remote operations. For the sake of our analysis, we're also considering a new facility as well too. So what would happen, and what would a new facility look like if you were to actually take the structure, demolish it, and actually construct a brand new facility downstream? And we'll get into that here shortly, what that looks like and what that would mean. but primarily our evaluations are on the modifications to the existing structure. And I'll talk about what those modifications that we're considering are here shortly. So in terms of the options and modifying the existing structure, we decided to break things up into multiple components and think about what you could do for each of those components and put them together into options. So we're looking at what we could do with the gates. And when we get into the options development, we'll look at, you know, whether it be minor repairs to more major repairs and refurbishments to potential replacement of those gates altogether. With the hoists, these are the hoists are what actually lift the gate up and down. We're looking at making some modifications to those hoists that accommodate the more frequent operations through some repairs, replacement of those hoists, perhaps refurbishment, or actually new hoists altogether. There's some controls and security considerations here as well too. So we're looking at the potential to actually add some remote monitoring at the site where you're actually collecting information on flow that's coming into the channel, stage conditions or water level conditions upstream and downstream from the gates, and adding telecommunications equipment for reclamation to be able to send signals to their offices, either in Tracy or in Sacramento or both. So that staff could actually see what conditions are at the site in real time. And then with that, what would the potential for a reclamation to operate this facility remotely may be? So based on certain conditions, does reclamation want to look at operating the facility through a remote condition rather than having staff go out to the site and operate those gates manually? We're also looking at some site improvements and safety. Some examples include, you know, improving the fencing around the structure, around the sites, paving the parking lot area, adding some handrails to meet accessibility requirements and be compliant with federal law. For water barrier safety improvements, and Mario alluded to this early on during his intro, we are looking at some options to modify the existing structure and add some water border safety options. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that here shortly too. So in terms of the options, and this is a very wordy slide, and I'll work my way through this and spend a few minutes on the slide just to provide you with an overview of what we're talking about here. We've developed 6 options for modifications to the site to accommodate more frequent options. And really there are 5 options to modify the existing structure, and then 1 option to replace the facility all out with a brand new structure. And they vary in their complexity from A to F. So starting with A, and working my way, working my way across on what A looks like, or working my way down just in terms of the gates. I'll start with actually describing what's happening with the gates and the hoists and the controls and security across each of the options that we're considering. So for the gates under option A, we're looking for a simple repair. Repair of the gates. There's some minor abrasions, minor corrosion on the gates, and we're looking to actually remedy that through applying some additional coating and some other minor repair activities. For option B, this would be a minor rehabilitation, so a little bit more than a repair, but we're calling this a minor rehabilitation. And for option C, this would be considered a major rehabilitation. Option D would also include that same major rehabilitation. And then for option E, we would look at replacing those gates altogether. And then obviously for option F, this would be a new gate bolt lock facility altogether. And I'll talk about what that bolt lock actually means. But instead, this option would actually look at demolishing the existing facility and constructing a new facility somewhere downstream that would include a bolt lock for passage of boats, recreational boats through the gate structure when those gates are closed. For the hoists under option A, again, we're looking at a minor repair of those existing hoists to accommodate more frequent operations. Going through option B, this would be a rehabilitation. New hoists for options C and D, and as well as E. And then obviously for a new facility, you would have new hoists there as well too. For controls and security, these look more or less the same across options A, B, and C, where we'll be adding some on-site monitoring of conditions at the site, but this would actually be a facility that would be operated through having staff out there on site, pressing a button and controlling the operation. So options A, B, and C would be on-site operations, and we're calling that out as the first feature here. but we would add remote monitoring at the site as well as some video surveillance for security. Under option D, we add what we're referring to here as remote operations and remote control. Again, allowing reclamation the ability to operate the facility remotely from either Sacramento or Tracy or wherever for that matter, based on conditions at the sites. We'd also have the remote operations in place for option E. And then for option F, the new gate boat lock facility, you would also have those remote operations in place. Site improvements and safety look the same for options A, B, and C. We would be replacing the handrails, paving the parking areas, and then improving the site fencing. For option D, because we're actually adding the option of remote operations at the site, we're adding a secure housing facility here. It's an O&M shed. Housing facility is probably an overstatement, but a structure or a shed to house the remote controlled equipment in a secure manner, temperature controlled in order to be able to actually maintain the integrity of that equipment. And that would be the same for option E. For option F, this would be a new site with new facilities, new safety features, and demolition of the old facility. And then for the water and boater safety improvements, options A, B, and C all look the same. We would be adding high visibility signs, programmable signage, as well as a louder and audible warning horn for operations of the site. Again, reclamation would have staff going out to the site on a regular basis and operating the facility manually, but they would be upgrading the water and boater safety features at the site for on-site operations. For option D, once we add that remote operation feature, we're actually suggesting adding what we're referring to here as movable barriers. So I'll get into this here shortly, but if you could picture railroad crossing or drawbridge crossing arms that come down and prevent boat traffic from actually passing or going through the gates while those gates are being operated. Clearly, when the gates are opened or closed, water and boater safety, it would not be an issue, but the concern is about boater traffic actually while those gates are being operated. So while the gates are actually being closed or while they're being opened, there are some concerns about safety and safety of those boaters or recreationalists traveling under those gates while they're being operated. And then with the new gate and boat lock facility, this would be completely different. You would actually have an operable boat lock in place with this new facility. And the associated boat lock safety features with that new facility as well too. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about water boater safety measures. The photo that you see at the bottom is actually of some recreational boaters passing underneath the gates while those gates are being closed. For those that weren't aware, it takes boat traffic, and we probably have attendees in this meeting that have much better knowledge of this than I am. But from what I understand, when these gates are closed, it takes about 4 hours to get from point A to point B, going in and around the Delta to the same location. Whereas when the gates are open, it actually provides a much quicker distance from point A to point B. So I believe it's about a 4-hour time difference. Obviously, depends on how fast your boat is. But right now, what reclamation does is before they operate these gates, they post some signs, some warning signs upstream and downstream from the gate structure, letting people know that the gates are actually going to be operated, the gates are going to be closing. Reclamation posts some information to the website. I understand that some signs and posted, some information is posted across some of the marinas in the area as well too. There's a warning horn sound about 20 minutes prior to operations of these gates. And then there's an operator on site actually making sure that those boats are passing. And believe me, when we're out there during this time, the reclamation operator was waving their arms. But of course, that wasn't very successful just in terms of actually preventing these boaters from passing under the gates while these gates are being operated. But having staff out there does allow for real-time responses as needed if there are any boater issues at site. So this is an overview of the boater safety measures that are out there at the site right now. Through reclamation, we have been engaging some stakeholders and stakeholder agencies just in terms of actually soliciting some feedback and input about things that we could do to try to improve boater safety at the site. So as Mario mentioned, we have engaged the California Department of Parks and Recreation Division of Boat and Waterways, we've also contacted and reached out to U.S. Coast Guard, and haven't really provided any substantive feedback from either of those entities. Based on some of the concepts that we've developed, they've agreed with the concepts and suggestions that they would address boater safety effectively for this project. So I'm going to go through and just share some information about some of the boater safety improvements under consideration. The first is a set of passive safety measures, and this would include enlarged signage with standard warning notifications. There could be status lights and or warnings of imminent gate closure. Website with information about the planned gate operations, and there is a website right now. Reclamation's website for the gate structure does provide some information about when the gates are going to be closed, but this could actually be made more prominent. There could be water depth markers on the upstream and downstream side of the gates, just providing an indication about how much clearance is available for passing under the gates, because water levels fluctuate in the Delta, obviously. And then some gate symbols on the upstream and downstream side of the gates that could be raised or lowered just depending on whether or not those gates are being operated. So some examples here shown on the right side. Some active operations information systems that are under consideration could include an electronic signage, similar to what you might see on the freeway, just providing some warnings to boaters and recreationalists about the pending gate closure or gate opening, or providing an indication for when those gates will be closed on a schedule. Could be some status lights, red, green, yellow type status lights or traffic signals, just providing a clearer indication of what's happening and whether or not boaters should be permitted to actually pass through those gate structures. And then lastly, some active remote gate operation warning system via what's referred to here as ICS, or Information and Control System. So this could be warning horns that are sounded before the closure. These could be boat barriers that are actually lowered prior to the gate closure, similar to what you see here. Of course, this is a roadway, but it would be like railroad or drawbridge crossing arms that are lowered or raised, depending on operations of the gates. Flashing lights or intermittent horns that are actually operated during the closure. And then some active real-time operations via instrumentation and control. Some additional measures here is we're going to have some cameras actually pointed at the structure, showing the upstream and downstream views of the channel, so that if Reclamation's operating this facility remotely, they can monitor in real time whether or not there are any actually boats approaching, and actually sound horns or sound some alarms, or even pause or stop the closure of the gates or opening of the gates in order to be able to accommodate or allow those boats to pass through safely. And then, of course, the ability to activate warning systems and update the electronic signs, and ability to remotely or stop or reverse gate movements during the operations. So I'll pause there for a minute, because the next piece that I'll talk about is the next steps regarding how we're going to evaluate options. But we were interested in actually any stakeholder or DPAC member and input or feedback about boater safety measures, maybe some things that you've seen in the past that may be effective that we haven't thought about or evaluated here. And of course, if you don't have any specific ideas and suggestions to share now, Colin and Reclamation are always up to your feedback and suggestions too.
Quick question.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this is Chris Elias. So is there any kind of coordination with the U.S. Coast Guard about this proposed approach and project, and as well as the great features you're putting in place to prevent people from unauthorized entryway into the structure? I think what you have laid out is really great. I was just wondering whether there's coordination with the Coast Guard.
Yeah, and Colin, I could go ahead and answer that. Just based on the recommendation of Virginia Gardner from the Delta Protection Commission, we did actually reach out to a contact at the U.S. Coast Guard that we know and understand is involved with recreation activities within the Delta, and solicited feedback and input about some of the boat safety measures, and we haven't heard back. But Chris, if you have any specific recommendations on other points of contact that would be worthwhile for us to engage, please share. You have to reach out.
Any
I have
other
a question.
questions?
I do. Barbara Daly.
Hi, Barbara. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I was wondering, are there records of anybody ever being hurt by these, during operations?
Not that we're aware of, Barbara. And just for reference, I mean, the safety concern, and it would be a big deal if it were to occur, of course, is in the event that the gates actually came down and there was a failure of the gates and they actually fell and while they were being operated and caused harm to a boater or boat traffic. That has never happened. And we hope that never happens ever, but it's a safety risk to take into consideration. So these are why we're actually considering these boater safety measures for this project.
I understand. It just seems like there's a lot of emphasis being put on it and perhaps not enough emphasis on the whole change being made. Just a little distracting, but thank you for your answer.
Eddie and then Russ.
Good afternoon, Jamil. This is Eddie Hard with California State Parks, Boating and Waterways. I just wanted to thank you for acknowledging that you've reached out to us, and I will make sure that we are responsive.
We have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Russ.
Yeah, Jamil, hey, thank you for this presentation. This is very useful. Now, I know what the purpose of the operations of these gates. Now, I'm a kayaker, and it take me more than 4 hours to go around. Have you guys ever thought of putting some kind of bypass around, which is at a much considerably less flow, where you can control that, like for kayakers or, recreation type folks? Just kind of curious. It's a curious question. Just was wondering.
Portage, Russ, portage.
Actually, this is Todd. Jamil, short story, I actually was a crawdad fisherman in my previous decades of life, and I actually hit the gate with my hydraulic boom on the boat, going at a very slow speed, but we hit it and almost completely stopped the boat and put a leak in the boat. That was probably an unreported accident that was totally my fault 42 years ago. But I've been through the gates hundreds of times in my own boats and never had a problem. So since then, thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Russ, was that it? Do you have another question, Russ?
That was it.
Okay.
Well, I'll go ahead and move on and just go through our next step. So I'd mentioned we're in the process of developing those initial options. And like I said, if you have any specific recommendations, input, feedback on some of the boater safety measures, and we're particularly interested in hearing from people like Todd who actually recreate and have gone through this facility. If you have any specific recommendations, please share those with Colin and the team. We'd be happy to take those into consideration. So after we've developed those options, next step is for our team to actually develop some evaluation criteria that we would apply for screening down those options, those 6 options down to 3, and I'll get into that here shortly. We're planning on actually applying the federal planning criteria for water resources projects, and you may have heard and seen these before. The 4 criteria, typically effectiveness, efficiency, completeness, and acceptability. Effectiveness is essentially how well your project meets your project objective. Efficiency is how efficient does your project meet that objective relative to the benefits and costs for the project. So it's the extent to which an alternative alleviates the specified problems and it realizes the opportunities at the least cost. And that's going to play an important factor, I think, when we actually talk about the options here. Completeness is the extent to which an alternative addresses and accounts for all the features, investments, and other actions that might be necessary to address or realize the planned effects, and also considers constructability and maintainability. And I'll get into that here shortly with our options too. And then lastly, acceptability is the viability or appropriateness of an alternative from the perspective of the nation's general public interest and consistency with existing federal laws, authorities, and public policies. An example of this could be the extent of the environmental impacts for the project. So looking at our next steps, we have these 6 options that we've identified and we're currently evaluating right now. Moving from left to right, option A, as I mentioned early, is really the simplest of the potential solutions. This is looking at some repairs of the existing facility and some on-site controls. Least cost option by all means, but at the same time, we're not replacing any of the features, we're simply repairing them. So the life expectancy of option A may be something a lot less than what could be expected for option E, as an example, where we're looking at major replacement, major upgrades and remote control. But of course, the costs actually go up fairly substantially as you move from left to right from option A to option E. When it comes to option F, we are looking at this new gate and new boat lock option. However, this, as you might imagine, this is actually going to be a lot more costly than either of the other options that we're evaluating, even a lot more costly than just looking at a major replacement or upgrading the existing facility, because this is new foundation, new structure altogether. And then we're also adding in this boat lock feature. So I'm bringing this all up because over the next few months, we're going to be developing and applying those evaluation criteria to evaluate these 6 options and screen them down to 3 alternatives that would be evaluated in further detail. These initial options we're currently developing at what's referred to as an appraisal level, which is really early stages of evaluation. And these 3 alternatives would be evaluated at the feasibility level, which is a little bit more detailed. So with that, I'll end there and hand over to Colin and Mario for any additional questions or comments.
Thank you, Jamil.
Thank you, Jamil. Mario, Colin, anything to add before we go to questions?
Nope, just appreciate the opportunity to keep you guys updated on where we're at and appreciate anybody providing feedback to us on this.
Well, Mario and Beth, thank you guys for having us today. And also, we appreciate hearing any more input that you have or any suggestions you have for other groups, individuals to reach out to get to discuss these building issues more, so we can fine tune this project and talk about potential boat passageways.
I know I've got a question. I guess it has to do with how static the evaluation model is when it comes to mixing and matching those columns, and that one big screen that had the rows and columns of the different options that you kind of walk through in detail. So for example, let's say that the decision was made and what you heard back from people was they really wanted an upgrade on the boating side or maybe the security side. Is there a way in your structure of analysis to gauge a high level of upgrade and improvement in the security side or the boating side and mix that or match that with, let's say, a relatively low upgrade on the, let's say, the hoist or the other components of the facility?
Yeah, to answer that is
more intensive in some columns, but less intensive in others is the question.
Yeah, one of the
So Mark, I think that's really where it gets back to, all this is leading to a NEPA document and the purpose and need statement. And so one of the actions that we're looking at is, the purpose and need is related to the ROC and LTO and the fact that the gates are opening and closing and more than they were originally designed to meet the water quality and the ESA benefits. And so I think as we get into the various alternatives that we look at, we can look at the weighting of those options and the recreational benefits associated with it. But part of that will be the conversation that my boss had of, as we get into recreational benefits that are beyond just the reasonable safety measures that we've employed, that's where we'd be looking for where we may be finding funding partners to assist with those activities.
Okay.
Mark, if you don't mind me just jumping in on that table, because I think you read into it correctly. I mean, there's a basis for why we compartmentalize the various components is for the opportunity to be able to mix and match and take a feature that was included in under option A and not necessarily included in option B to come up with the most suitable alternative that actually meets the objective along what Mario is actually suggesting, meeting that purpose and need. So yes, we do have that ability to modify and move some things around.
In some matters, and I'll just kind of clarify, there are some considerations that in order to move to like a remote operation of the gate, we would not be able to do that with the existing hoist system. And so there are some components that require upgrades in order to, for example, provide the remote operation or, remotely control that. And some more substantive upgrades to some of the telecommunications as well with that.
Sure. And those are like hard stops within each. But my question is more general, so, but certainly
Yeah,
understand.
there's definitely means of I don't want to say a la carte, but there are some interrelationships and things like, you probably wouldn't want to replace the gate, and there's just some logic too of you wouldn't want to necessarily wholesale replace the gates and do a minor repair to the existing hoists, just in kind of consideration of the overall facility. So.
Very good. And I'm thinking, Eric, one of our members is not present. Kathy has extensive on the water experience, and we'll have to make sure to get this presentation to her for any comments that she may have. In fact, Mario, are we going to be able to? Is Eric going to be able to send this presentation out to our wider group so we catch people that weren't able to make the meeting today?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get a copy to Eric after this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Let's see. I gotta go through the list. Let's see. No hands raised. Any questions, comments?
Just a comment, Mark.
Yes. Hi, Barbara. Go ahead.
As I listen to it, it just sounds a lot like going back to the old BDCP and Twin Tunnels days. And it sounds a lot like Alternative 9 that wasn't talked about much during those days. It was always Alternative 1 through Alternative 8. But this was the Alternative 9 for the Walnut Grove, Lock, Georgiana Slough area. So just put that out there. Sounds an awful lot like it.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
Let me just add another question if I can. I think this is a yes. No, I'm not looking for too much detail here. But in 2016, Congress passed the WIN Act. I think it was signed into law in December of 2016. And one of the main components of that statute was to incorporate more real-time monitoring in operations in the Delta, as opposed to like fixed points on the calendar that may or may not align with whatever reality was that year. Is this project in the direction you're heading seen as one of the implementation measures of the larger themes established in that set of statutes?
Yeah, so the WIN Act and the implementation of it, of those provisions that you're talking about, and kind of what I characterize kind of the sound, reasonable science of trying to make actions based on the information, best available information that we have in front of us, was incorporated largely into the reinitiation of consultation process that we went through in 2019. And so that's where a lot of that real-time monitoring and adaptive management and aspects get put into there. A lot of the Delta cross-channel gate upgrades that we're talking about here are really just related to us opening and closing the gates to associate with our better understanding of the ESA species going through the Delta now, along with there's also some colony flows that now we interact with, and we open and close the gates to improve their salmon recovery for their species too. So there is a relationship to the WIN Act, but largely this is related to just our better understanding and improvement of what's happening in the Delta and when ESA species are there.
Yeah, it seems like a great project. So especially since certainly an upgrade over the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Looking.
Eric, it's Robin Brown here.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. Just a comment to follow up on what Barbara was saying. I'm from a very avid boating family, water skiing family. In fact, we just zoomed under the cross channel last night on our way to dinner. But I would say, as much as we are boaters, I don't see, and I've been under it thousands, literally thousands, at least 1,000 times over my lifetime. I don't really see the need for more recreation for boaters as important enough to, I don't know what the expense is. Perhaps I missed it. Well, we don't know yet because you have different options. But I don't really see the option for more boating recreation as very important. You know, we're all pleased when the cross channel is open, when the gates are open, and we can head over that way. It's very fun. But when it's not, you know, it's not a problem. We just continue along the river and ski elsewhere.
No, appreciate that. I think maybe what might got lost a little bit today is we're looking, the upgrades are really in relation to the actual physical facility. That's the impetus for evaluating, doing the evaluation here. But while we're there, we know one of the components that is important here is the recreational aspect. And so that's why today we focused on the recreational aspect. It's one of the areas we know the least about. Reclamation is pretty good in the engineering side, and Stantec is great on that side too, but that local knowledge of the recreation was why we focused on that today. But the real impetus on this is making sure that structure continues to do the job that it was built in the 50s and 60s to maintain salinity control.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really wasn't actually clear, so that makes sense.
Thank you, Robin.
Appreciate that question.
Thank you, Robin. Eric, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for either Mario or Colin. So is there something about the current operation of the gates that, you know, you all would like to raise and lower them more, but there's something about recovery period after you raise or lower? I'm just trying to understand, is this purely to institute safety features? I think at one point you said more frequent operation of the gates, and I just don't know if that is hampered by the way they currently exist, and that's the real motivation for the improvement project.
No, if I could take this one, Mario.
Sure.
The gates can operate to the frequency they need right now. Currently, the major drive for this is to ensure the gates can keep operating for another 50 or 60 years. But we don't know what might happen with regulations in the future. Potentially there could be more frequent operations. That's not within the bookends of this project. But when we start looking at upgrading the facility through the gates and the hoist to make sure that we have a facility that operates into the middle of this century, we can look at the cost and see how much more it would cost to add a hoist and gates that could operate, 300 times a year as opposed to 30 or 40 times, and see if it's worth the cost and the effort.
Thank you.
Okay, I think just checking one more time for hands. Mario, Colin, Jamal, thank you very much for keeping us updated. And this is, I think, the third time. So appreciate very much letting us know what's going on and hearing our comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, next item. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mario.
I was just saying thank you.
You're welcome. Eric, commission activities. Eric, your mic's off if you're saying anything.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I'm a bit of a noob when it comes to this Zoom stuff. You think I'd be a total pro at it by now. What I'd like to do with this update of commission activities, I'd like to cede about 10 minutes of my time to Virginia Gardner. She is our lead on managing the master plan development for the Great California Delta Trail. And so I'm going to pull that up onto the screen unless you see it already on the screen. And Virginia is going to run through a few slides, and then I'm going to follow up with some additional updates on other activities. But if I could hand it over to Virginia for no more than 10 minutes to run through a few slides here on the master plan effort. And can someone give a thumb, Virginia, can you give a thumbs up? Great. So the floor is all yours.
Hi there, everybody. It's good to see some or all of you at any given time. Virginia Gardner, Program Manager for the Delta Protection Commission, and wanted to give you a quick update on the Delta Trail Master Plan because we're hoping that you have feedback for us, either now or later. Eric, if you can advance the slide. The way the Delta plan is structured is, to separate into, sort of the general typical overview, existing conditions. We looked at opportunities and constraints for the Delta Trail. We have plan recommendations in chapter 3. So if you don't have a lot of time, you might want to think about focusing on that when you see the draft come out in a few weeks. We have given some trail design elements, suggestions, and then have some additional suggestions about implementation. Next slide. So as I mentioned, chapter 1 is an intro and overview section. And as part of our effort, we conducted a couple of different surveys. The one that you see some excerpts from here is complete, was finished up in June for the general public. And then we have another one for levee managers that is still underway. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. This slide just shows kind of a heat map of survey responses from the public survey about where the locations of most of the responses were. You can see that a lot of them were from the Benicia area, West Sacramento, Rio Vista, and so forth. We asked respondents to describe their connection to the Delta, and they could select all that apply. And so 55% of the respondents visit, 54% live in the Delta, and 23% work in the Delta. And as you can see, the numbers go on down from there. Next slide, Eric. Then we also asked, what would people like the Delta Trail to be? It seemed as though most of the respondents wanted connected trails, whether it was a main trail with connections to local trails at 56%, or more like a network of connected trails. And it was important to people that we have a trail that connects to other regional trails, which of course is what it's basically mandated to do. Next slide, please. So we asked people also how would they use the trail, because we were trying to get at the question of what kind of design elements should serve those purposes. And as you can see, most people said they wanted to enjoy themselves outdoors. Thank goodness. And then explore 62% and exercise 62%. So there was a pretty much a consensus on that. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the levee manager survey, which is currently in progress still. We emailed, and snail mailed surveys to 110 reclamation district representatives, which so far we've had about half of a response from 8 levee managers who represent those 50 districts. We're looking to get more responses. We would really like to know what levee managers think about how you would do trails. If you were doing trails on or around a levee, how you would go about doing that, what would be the parameters. So we still have until September 17th, which is 10 days from today. And we would love it if anybody can spread the word and contact me. I'm going to be sending out a reminder to the levee managers, the DELHAC group, through the coordinator in the next few days. So we'll get a little bump, we hope, from that. And then we will be including those in the Great Delta Trail Master Plan Commission presentation. The draft currently that's going to the Technical Advisory Committee and Stakeholder Advisory Committee does not include all those responses because obviously we don't have them yet, but those are coming and they will play an important role. Next slide, please. So then moving on to chapter 2, we had existing conditions and opportunities and constraints. There we go. And we kind of paired the existing condition maps with expanded description of the existing conditions, opportunities and constraints. And of course, it's really hard to see. This is a very busy slide, but it's really just to kind of flash in front of you how we're approaching the overall depiction. And we include existing conditions of levee systems, roadways, bridges and ferries, regional trails, whether they're existing or planned, transit to trails, boating and waterways, outdoor recreational facilities, and a few others. Next slide, please. So then we move into the plan recommendations section. Sort of what is the Delta Trail? How do we define it? We're focusing on a main continuous corridor from the San Francisco Bay Trail at Carquinez up to the Sacramento River Parkway Trail, and then with local access trails connecting to and from the main corridor. We want to have a clear and unifying concept. And we also want to include water trailheads. That's going to become very important. That will provide access to the main trail corridor. We've already gotten some good suggestions from some folks on our technical advisory committee about paying attention to where there are some old boat ramps and so forth. So for example, and we'll be presenting to the water trail group that is convened by the Bay Area folks at the Metropolitan Transit Association. It's basically their council of governments there, and that will be coming up on Friday. The consultant will be doing that for me. Next slide, please. So then we sort of highlighted on the recommendations, we're highlighting counties, legacy communities, and other communities and cities. Anywhere we have existing trail segments for the Delta Trail that have already been designated. Adventure hub opportunities where we're going to try to have those be available to be capitalized with the National Heritage Management Plan that will be coming in, moving into that space. And then basically just trail recommendations for existing or proposed that are already planned. And next slide, please. Now I mentioned the trail design elements that are in chapter 4. Here's where we have, what could be considered some sort of guidance, but we wanted to leave it pretty open. So we're calling them design elements for different types of trail. One example on the bottom, for example, shows bikeways along a roadway that has wide shoulders. Some alternatives for exposed bikeway and bikeway with barriers are also shown. The yellow post that's sticking up. And then fences are also shown between the roadway and agricultural fields. But of course, these would all be tailored to whatever the particular site features required and demanded in terms of property ownership and so forth. Next slide, please. So then we get to chapter 5, the implementation section. As you can see, it's a wonderful circle of continuous processing between local planning, design, construction, operations, and maintenance. Of course, maintenance and operations is always a favorite of mine because I believe strongly that where you have any kind of trails and access, you need to maintain those areas so that trash is picked up and people have places where they can use the restroom. And so that prevents problems. So that's a big one on mine, which then leads to item 5, which is costs and funding. So we'll be trying to promote some ideas in that section of the plan. And the next slide. So the key dates, we are in the process of the review. We mailed out draft plan to our technical advisory committee and our stakeholder advisory committee on Friday, right before a 3-day weekend. we figured they'd either be fresh on Tuesday today, or they would spend their entire weekend commenting. And then we have a public review kickoff that will be to the commission at the November 18th commission meeting. And then between November and mid-December, we'll have public review, which includes a couple of outreach meetings, virtual presentation, and so forth. And then we're hoping that the commission will be able to adopt the plan in January of 2022. And with that, that is my final briefing piece. I believe I just now gotten 10 minutes. So I don't know if we want to have questions or hold them for later.
No, certainly. If there are any questions, this would be a good time, Virginia.
I think Douglas, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Virginia. Representation. Well, my question is, I see there's a horseshoe on the logo. So does that mean that the horseback riding trail is under consideration?
There are some areas where horseback riding is definitely an interest. And there are already some trails, especially in the Bay Area, Contra Costa, for example, and Solano, where those would be of value. Although Solano is also possibly an area where we would be having water trail features, but so yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Russ?
Yeah, hi, Virginia. Thank you for the presentation. That was a very well done presentation. I have a question on the levies for the levy managers. Can you send me that survey? I have not seen it, and I'm on the board for 4 of our rec districts.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, Virginia, could you say, I wondered that as well. Can you say a little bit more about who they were distributed to? Was it to the engineers or to the attorneys or the trustees? Who did it go out?
We had a bit of a time coming up with a complete mailing list, and when it was brought up at the DELHAC meeting, there were a few people who were scratching their heads. We were sending them to the engineers because we figured that engineers would have more of an idea of what might be concerning about structural aspects and so forth. However, there are a number of people that we've spoken to who requested or were sent surveys simply because they were sort of both an district engineer and a board president or representative. We also ended up sending some of the surveys to the board secretary for distribution. So we're happy to send them out to anyone at all. We had a very long period of time for the survey because we knew that it's a really busy time of year, and we figured that we might have issues with getting the word out to everyone. So that's why we're here, among other things. So happy to do that, Russ.
Yeah, Russ, we're using the DWR Directory of Flood Officials, which in a perfect world would be completely updated with the right names and contacts every year, but probably we don't live in a perfect world. And so
it's not
the only thing I'd correct that Virginia said, the engineer will never be a trustee. I don't know of any such cases. So if we sent out to the engineer first, then that's a pretty limited set of people, because as everyone knows, we've got levy engineers that represent many, many districts. And so if it's very possible that in your case, Russ, it went to your levy engineers and then
probably so. But I'm thinking our board meetings aren't till the 23rd this month. And if there's a deadline of the 17th, I want to jump on it.
Yeah.
ASAP and get
Agreed.
it done.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that is a good point, because we reached out to a few folks sort of to gauge whether we should send to board presidents or engineers, and spoke with a couple of engineers who said, well, we do have our board meetings coming up and we can distribute this information. But obviously it doesn't apply for all of the districts. So this is good information, and I will be happy to, I think we're going to have it sent out to all of the DelHack mailing list, which may be a lot more complete as well. But we'll
Thank you.
make sure to send directly to you, Russ. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia.
Very good. Douglas, did you have another question?
Nope, nope.
Okay, very good. Any other questions before we go to the rest of?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the only thing I'll add to that before I talk a little bit about some other activities at the commission, that timeline, I think what I would like to do, and I'll talk to Virginia about this and to you as well, Mr. Chair, DPAC would, if it kept to its schedule, would next meet on Tuesday, November 2nd. And maybe we could take some time on that agenda to go through the recommendations in greater detail. I mean, we're expecting that they might be honed a bit as we visit with our technical and stakeholder advisory committees later this month. But Virginia, do you see a problem with that? Having some kind of I know we always like to present a draft to the advisory committee even before we ask the commission to bless a draft. Do you see a problem with that for November 2nd?
Yeah, no, not at all. And that will be well after the review by the TAC and SAC. We were just concerned that if the TAC and SAC hadn't weighed in on the final internal draft, then there would be changes again.
Sure.
And since we're still midstream on the TAC and SAC review, it's kind of premature. But absolutely, yeah, I'd love to come back and see you all, and we'll dive into chapter 3 more.
Yeah, so I'll work with Chair Mark Pruner on that, but I think that might be a good addition to the next DPAC meeting agenda.
Good. One question, Virginia. I know where I'm in the North Delta, and on weekends in particular, there are lots and lots of bicyclists out on the roads, on the levee roads with that much of a shoulder and truck traffic, especially during harvest. Has there been outreach to folks that are in groups or people that are bicyclists to get their input on some of these features?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. We one of our first comment letters was from the Sacramento Wheelmen, and they do have a lot to say about the safety, but they still love cycling in the Delta. So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be a challenge, regardless on some of those roads that, but we are definitely looking at contacting as many of the user groups as we possibly can. And also Barbara and others, Robin, businesses, because we believe that the trails will enhance business, business traffic in areas where there are trailheads. So we think that's a really strong support for recreation and tourism.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Virginia. Eric.
Yeah, let me just add on a few other recent activities of the commission staff. The first I wanted to mention is that we will continue to carefully monitor the activity surrounding the proposed Delta Tunnel, the Delta Conveyance Project, which, by the way, the environmental impact report and the corollary environmental impact statement on those are anticipated still. We still keep hearing April to May of 2022. So that sounded like a long ways away back at the start of this process, and now we're within like a 7 to 8 month window. So things are going to start to happen quickly. We have members of our advisory committee here who are part of the stakeholder engagement committee. That committee has been a little inactive, but they're gearing up again with a meeting later this month. That's why there was no update from the stakeholder engagement committee on today's agenda. But that effort is expected to pick up again from a summer slowdown, and expect to hear more. one activity that we're engaged with our county colleagues is on what's called the Section 106 process, which is the federal effort to ensure that cultural resources are adequately considered and addressed as part of an environmental impact statement. And this provides us an opportunity. We're working with the Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're the lead on the Section 106 process, but we'll have county participation, and it does provide an opportunity to ensure that impacts to cultural resources, which really extends beyond just impacts to a particular historic structure. You know, it could apply to a scenic landscape, which of course, that's like 100% of the Delta right there. So it has pretty broad applicability, and we think that careful participation in this process by both the commission and the counties will ensure greater protections embedded into the environmental impact statement and the process moving forward. So Sam has his hand up. Do you have a question about that, Sam?
Yeah, I was just curious. You mentioned the Corps, so I presume they're your federal lead.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering which part of the Corps is serving of the lead, is the lead? Is it, you know, the 108 or the 408 process folks, or the regulatory group, or is it in operations and planning?
It would be the regulatory group. And so, which I think are the same people that oversee the permitting.
That's right. Yeah.
But I really don't understand how the Corps is organized. We don't work with them a lot. I'll probably learn more through this process. You probably know a whole lot more, Sam and Eddie, and I see some other smiles. So I think others know more about the Corps, but I hope I got that right, Virginia. Correct me if I misspoke there.
Nope, they're regulatory.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just curious, you know, sometimes they limit their scope of analysis. And so you might get a 106 request that's just for little bits of fill and waters and forgets about everything else on your overall project. But anyways, if you ever need help with that, I'm happy to review from a regulatory perspective.
Well, I appreciate that, Sam. We might call on you because this is our first rodeo, and you know, we're going to be learning about the process. We have some help. We've got part of our team that has had experience with Section 106 before, so that will be helpful. But yeah, we're going to be very diligent with the Corps, and you know, push them every step of the way to really take this seriously, and not. They might be able to brush it off with a simple, you know, small wetland fill project, but not with a project of this magnitude. So
Eddie has his hand up. Eddie?
Yeah, I probably goes without saying, Eric, they're not all terrestrial under the cultural. We've encountered with our Section 106 foray into the Corps process that there's a lot of underwater issues as well. Cultural resource issues. So that was an eye opener for us.
Okay, that's good. I think Virginia's paying particular attention right now, because I don't know that I mean, I think we were mainly thinking mostly land-based, but if we're not, we'll also include water-based as well.
Sure.
Thank you, Eddie.
Chris, did you want to comment?
Yeah, certainly, yes. I wanted to thank Eddie for bringing that up. And then actually letting you know that that is in fact the Corps you know, has this consultation program in place where they not just simply go to, again, just cultural folks, they also go to the other resource agencies like, you know, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. And I suspect this may well trigger consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Something to think about.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
I have my hand up.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
Barbara, go
Barbara.
ahead.
I didn't see your hand, sorry.
Yes, I don't know how to show that. About 5 years ago, OSHA Reserve, Russell Ooms and I met with the Army Corps about Section 106 and gave them a binder of things to look for in the Delta that we wanted them to pay attention to. I'd be happy to provide a copy of that binder to whoever, if you are going to take that to the next step.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Can I ask Virginia to follow up with you on that? We all seem to be giving the Corps a lot of materials. We either provided them or are going to provide them with a pretty lengthy write-up arguing about the cultural, a broader vision of cultural resources in the Delta. And, you know, it's everything from the agricultural setting to all the things that you would expect in a, you know, historic and a cultural review. But we're certainly taking a very expansive look at this, and we'll be pushing the Corps at every turn to consider this in a real expansive way. So,
Yes.
but I think
Hopefully not so
Virginia-
expansive that it kills your project, though. I mean, we want it to go through and not have any big impacts. Otherwise, you know, it hangs it up even farther. You know,
But
that's
you would shed tears if the Delta Tunnel project gets hung up. I can say that since Chris Chernell left the meeting. So personally, I would be overjoyed at that. So kill it.
And so would I. Let's
Thank
kill
you,
it.
Barbara.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyway, Barbara, I think Virginia will want to follow up with you because I think at the very least, we'd be real interested to see what you prepared for them and if that can in any way supplement what we're, you know, the reams that we're going to be giving them as well. So
Thank you. And I agree. I think Section 106 could be the key to stopping the tunnel project. Because the Delta is the other half of the gold rush that nobody talks about. These legacy towns were created by not the 49ers, but by the Argonauts who came up the river.
yeah,
So
I would love it if that were the case. I don't think that's realistic, but I think it is realistic that they would have to incorporate a lot of protective features for cultural resources into their project. And maybe if we can get enough of those into a project, the project will collapse under its own weight. So,
okay. Thank you.
I would love it if that were the outcome, Barbara. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation. I don't think that in and of itself would kill this project, but maybe if the project gets costly enough, it will. So,
Well, I'm working toward the best possible goal.
yeah.
So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, just a few more things I wanted to report on. Our work on the National Heritage Area and the required management plan is proceeding. Last week on Monday, the 30th of August and Tuesday, the 31st, we had honest to goodness in-person meetings. We were in Benicia with about 22 participants, and we were in Walnut Grove with about 30 participants. And I want to thank Douglas Shaw and Morris Lum for being there in person. Everyone wore a mask. We were in big rooms. We were talking to each other. It was just like the good old days. It was pretty awesome. And those meetings were really the first opportunity to present the, not a proposed management plan, but kind of the outlines of the management plan to the public. And it's just one of many opportunities that we'll have to take this out to the public. Next steps include, we have a management plan advisory committee. There is some overlap with our DPAC on that advisory committee membership. That group is going to meet on Thursday of this week. They've been meeting since, I think, February or March. And so they're the group that will be formally advising our commission on the development of the management plan. And the pieces are starting to come together. I wouldn't say they've come together yet, but they're starting to come together. Our ultimate goal is to get the management plan approved by the fall of 2022. So a lot of work is going to occur over the next year, the next 13 months, I should say, to get that to conclusion. More to come on that, and we'll certainly take advantage of opportunities to visit with DPAC along the way. The Delta marketing campaign, Stacey Hayden is our lead on this. She presented 4 virtual marketing workshops to help Delta businesses expand their marketing efforts. The good news is that all 4 of those were captured and recorded on Zoom, and they're available on the commission website. If you're a Delta business and you're interested in how to improve your internet presence or utilize guerrilla marketing, which is low-cost marketing efforts to bring attention to your business, I'd encourage you to take a look at those recorded sessions that are on the commission website. And then also, we just awarded our Best of the Delta. We recognized the Best of the Delta awardees. We had the 5th annual Best of the Delta competition. The voting ended on July 31st. We had nearly double the number of voters this year as we did last year, and recognized businesses in 18 different categories. We had a brief presentation at a Delta Chambers mixer that was held last month, deep in the Delta, and we've forwarded those materials, the certificates, and are, getting the word out through visitcadelta.com about the awardees. But it continues to be a real successful effort and is great about drawing attention to a variety of Delta businesses. Our commission is meeting next week on September 16th, Thursday, September 16th, 4 p.m. It's a pretty light agenda. We'll have our usual reports, both me reporting on commission staff activities, Mark Pruner reporting on this meeting of the DPAC. We'll have updates from the Delta Stewardship Council and the Delta Conservancy, a presentation on our activities surrounding Delta flood preparedness, both the upcoming Delta Flood Preparedness Week and then a website on flood preparedness that we're standing up, and we'll be getting the word out throughout the Delta to assist people with resources that can help them be flood ready. And, when we're in the Delta, we always need to be flood ready, even though we don't have regular flooding, but you want to be ready when it comes. So, and then finally, there will be a closed session at the conclusion of the meeting to evaluate my performance as executive director. And with any luck, I'll be rejoining you at your next DPAC meeting. Or not, I can be let go at any time. I'm completely at will. So, and then finally, Delta Waterway Cleanup is coming up. That's going to be on Saturday, September 18th. We will be captaining sites at 5 different locations throughout the Delta, 2 of them along the Sacramento River, one in Sacramento, the other in West Sacramento, in those 2 cities, Bethel Island in Contra Costa County, Buckley Cove in Stockton, and the Sacramento River levee near the Helen Madeir Memorial Bridge, the Rio Vista Bridge in Rio Vista. So we are seeking volunteers for all of those. We're getting the word out through our channels. We're working with local groups that can turn out volunteers. And this activity was curtailed last year because of COVID, but we're back in person this year, masks, and we already have the gloves and the grabbers and all the good stuff to limit human contact with trash. And so we'll hopefully have a very successful event on September 18th. And if history is any guide, we'll be back to 100-degree weather on that day. So if you're planning on when to be out at the coast and you're not going to help us with our trash cleanup, I recommend going on September 18th. It'll undoubtedly be a scorcher. So Anyway, that's what I have to report. And guess what? We took the full 2 hours tonight. So much
Good.
for a short meeting.
Amazing.
Anyway, I don't know if there are any questions, but I'd be happy to entertain any. Those are just the highlights. We've certainly got other activities going on as well, but I wanted to hit the high points.
Yes, any questions?
Yeah, very quickly, this is Chris Elias. Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, sure. So Eric, you talked about the cleanup activities in various spots, and I don't know, what all the outreach channels are to the volunteers, but I was wondering whether it's possible to notify, to maybe, I don't know, again, I don't know what the channels are, what are you using, Facebook or something to broadcast the message, and whether we could also have this information up to, say, like the city councils in our county, particularly Stockton City Council, so that the city council members could be invited to also bring their constituents with them. I don't know whether that's, if they've already hit that area, we don't need to revisit it, but I was just wondering the expanse of the scope of outreach to our community here.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. And I'll have to ask Stacey about that relative to the Buckley Cove pickup. I know we've had hundreds of volunteers at that cleanup in the past. That's always been our best attended.
Okay, good.
And so based on that, we might just be working through our normal channels. I'm pretty sure that others organize it and we just show up to captain it and to bring the supplies and to do the reporting back to California Coastal Cleanup Day.
Okay.
By the way, this is all part of California Coastal Cleanup Day. So there's litter removal efforts occurring all over the state, but we call it Delta Waterway Cleanup. And of course that, the water goes to the coast. So, but I'll ask about that, Chris. I appreciate the heads up. And we always look forward to, the local electeds love turning up at stuff like this. It's a real feel-good activity all the way around. So
yeah, and all the alumni of your program.
Yes, and the Delta Leadership Program alums.
That's right.
We've talked about that as part of the Delta Leadership Program as well at different times.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Eric. No, any other questions? Last call.
I would just say, Eric, good luck on your review and hope to see you in the next DPAC meeting.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Russ.
Hope to see you, Eric. Thank you so much. All right, with that.
I'm pretty sure I'll be here in November.
I know.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but it'll take a little bit to get rid of me. I'll dig in my claws.
There you go. Go out fighting. Or come in fighting.
Well, I'll assume the best until I need to redirect my activities.
All right, and on that upbeat, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you all for coming and see you in November.
Yeah, November 2nd. I'll send out a meeting reminder here shortly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mark.
Eric.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Eric.
Thank
Bye-bye to
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.